The year is 1933. Hoover is out and FDR is in. During the campaign of 32, FDR promised happy days are here again. But how? In his first 100 days, FDR deployed his New Deal, a deal between the federal government and the people. The deal was to bring relief, recovery, and reform through a myriad of federal programs dubbed the Alphabet Soup Agencies. FDR would bridge the gap between the federal government and the people while helping to bring a sense of calm to the nation that was on the brink of panic. Today, Mr. O'Hagan and I will showcase a few local projects that were part of the New Deal right here on Long Island. All next on this episode of APUSH on the Road.
All right, folks, here we are at the Garden City Post Office. This, of course, was as you can get through the railing here. There we go. So the Garden City Post Office was actually part of that PWA funding. It was actually set aside in 1933, and the money for the post office actually amounted to $84,300. So this was one of about 6 or 7 post offices that was built specifically with money from that particular allotment of the PWA. And there's the eagle on top of the doors, which is kind of commonplace in a lot of the work of the PWA. But this was finalized and built in 1936. That first image you saw, of course, was the cornerstone. Henry Morgenthau was the Secretary of the Treasury under FDR, and it was Morgenthau whose name ended up on the building. People get a little iffy if you video them, so I'm just kind of moving around here. And this, of course, is the site of the original flagpole. Not as exciting as it might have looked, I guess. All right, there, of course, is the actual flagpole that we now have there. All right, but one of the examples of the New Deal alive and well today, right here in Garden City. Let's see if we can get another shot of that cornerstone. There it is.
Okay, Push Nation, we are back, and here we are at the Northport Post Office in Northport, New York. And what we're seeing here is the cornerstone of the post office. Started in 1935. This is similar to the one that is at the GC post office. So I'm getting a little bit wider view of the post office, and yes, people think I'm weird for videotaping the post office, but hey, for APUSH on the Road, we do what we have to do. But what you're seeing here is now this, again, part of the New Deal projects. Now, whereas the Garden City Post Office was part of the WPA, from the information that I found, that the Northport Post Office was actually straight from the Treasury Department. So the Treasury Department, which is obviously going to fund the WPA and the PWA and all the other public works projects, funded the Northport Post Office. Now, I would venture to say that this was a WPA project, but this was actually not part of the allotment. From my research, the allotment that built roughly 6 post offices that Mr. O'Hagan talked about in his clip in the region, most notably the Garden City Post Office. I believe the Port Jefferson Post Office is on that list, etc. But again, we saw in that video clip where the closest that the American people got to the federal government before the New Deal and before FDR was the post office. And here we're seeing federal monies putting people, 1, to work, and 2, impacting the people directly.
All right, APUSH Nation, we are inside the rotunda of the Nassau County Executive Building. And in this rotunda is a little bit of the history of the New Deal. So remember, we talked about how artists were also employed by the New Deal, and there are 4 beautiful murals that were painted by a local Seacliff artist 1937 into 1938, I believe. And just a great example, don't mind the poll, hold on. A great example of how the New Deal worked hard, not just to employ people like the CCC, where they were reforesting the land and taking care of the topsoil, not just building schools and post offices, as we've seen in our other videos, but also employing artists. So these murals represent 4 different important points, periods, in Nassau County's history. And the last one is of the famous Oyster Bay resident, Teddy Roosevelt, laying the cornerstone for the Nassau County Courthouse. Obviously a little love for his distant cousin there in the New Deal programs of Franklin Roosevelt. Just another great example of how the New Deal is still very much a part of our day-to-day life and the legacy it's left behind. Right here on the corner of Old Country Road and Franklin Avenue. Say bye, Rotunda.
Hello, APUSH Nation, and welcome to APUSH on the Road. This is Mr. Zagari, and we are in Crab Meadow Beach in Northport, New York, sitting on the lovely North Shore, overlooking Long Island Sound, and way across the way there you can see on the horizon is Connecticut. So, in this episode of APUSH on the Road, as you may have seen, we are doing local New Deal projects here on Long Island. So we are at Crab Meadow Beach, like I said, and this takes us to the pavilion. Now, this was done as part of Parks and Recreation, and this was also completed by the WPA, or the Works Progress Administration. It was started in 1937 and completed in 1938. This is along with the second era of the New Deal. Now, what we're seeing here is that this was in the old pavilion that was once here was replaced by this pavilion in this Mediterranean style, and I'll show you pictures of that in the foreground of this. But this was used with building locker rooms for men and women and part of these localized work projects. The monies that were actually allocated for this project were divvied up between the state of New York and the township of Huntington. So we see here the federal government is infusing WPA monies into the local levels for them to do as they see fit for these works, these public works projects. So this was actually redone a few years ago. This sun deck was an original aspect of the New Deal project, but I was looking for a cornerstone of anything. There was no eagle that usually indicates a WPA project, but you know, this Art Deco styling, this Mediterranean styling, is something that resembles the time period. And this is a great pizza spot if you're ever on the North Shore in Northport. So this is Crab Meadow Beach, part of the WPA, started in 37, ended in 38. We'll take care. We'll see you soon.